Welcome, welcome, welcome back to the Owner's Manual for the Human Body. This is India Irie, and we are so pleased to have our regular panel back together with us this week for a show called Losing Patience. Pun intended, it really is. We are joined this week from the Global Sovereign Alliance TV network here on NBT by Troy Mathisen. You'll see him on many of the shows here at Expanding UTV because he is just a wealth of information. First, I want to take the time to welcome you, Troy, to the Owner's Manual for the Human Body, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here today. Appreciate the opportunity very much.
Absolutely. It's going to be a grand time and a wonderful conversation. This show is inspired by the book written by this wonderful creature walking this planet right now, Darko Velcek. Thank you for joining us from Peru, my darling.
Oh, thank you, India. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Dr. Jeremy, co-founder of Naturally Better TV and a very, very awake and aware healer on the front lines of changing our paradigm. Dr. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Indy, and particularly thank you, Troy, for joining us. We got some really good stuff to share with you this week.
Last but never ever least, our very own Clivepedia, bringing the health revolution to a network near you from NBTV as well. Thank you for joining us, Clive, and good morning.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, virtually here. I'm looking forward to this episode. Excellent.
Absolutely. This one is going to be a show that is going to be emotionally trying because everyone has experienced what it's like to either be unwell or have a friend, family member who is unwell. And eventually we experience death. But in the arena of natural health, natural wellness and healing, it's an extraordinary topic because normally our healers see patients when it's the very last resort. So there's a lot more pressure. And then also there's the need to prove what the thought process or the protocols are to those who are quite unsure about what natural health is all about. Today we're going to get an understanding of the system that we identify as medicine. What's the difference between health and wellness and the allopathic means that we experience today as healthcare? And there's a lot of legal terminology that is able to cloak the truths in these matters so that we are left in a state of confusion as well as being toxic and diseased. So we want to unravel those knots. We love to do that here on the Owner's Manual. And today I just want to start the show with Dr. Jeremy because this topic is very near and dear to his heart. So I'm going to let him begin the conversation with this topic of losing patience. Dr. Jeremy.
Thanks, Indy. This show was prompted in my mind some months ago now. Being somebody on Facebook and in groups, I'm ever encouraged by the level of what can only be called revolution, but we often put the R in brackets because it's an evolution that is occurring, commonly known as an awakening at all levels of consciousness, law, language, the deception, medicine, and so on and so forth. And, you know, I have to sit back in awe at the level of knowledge the so-called general public have. Honestly, I'm frequently learning from them as much as contributing. But equally to that side, there is people who are not awake to many of the things that have been set up to harm you, frankly. And the one thing, and we've got to be very careful on this show, and this is part of the reason of the show, because I don't want to say too much and it linked back to people if possible. But there was a particular family on Facebook who I'd been following but felt unable to comment in any way, whose daughter had cancer. In, I think, her late teens, maybe early 20s, I can't remember, but a young woman nonetheless. And it's a traditional form that many are familiar with, particularly since we've had the pink ribbon entourage over the last month, and I'm going to do a show on that soon. I'm going to certainly write a blog on it when you realize what pink ribbon really is. But anyway, so I watched these wonderful people, this wonderful family, and that was very apparent. And what was interesting is they have more people following and commenting on this one girl's always fight, isn't it? It's always a fight for cancer, than we seem to get on any of our posts. You know, so masses of people involved, lots of money raised, and lots of pictures that I've become, just like these selfies on Facebook. If you are in the disease commonly known as cancer and making it public, the photographs are almost all the same, which is usually someone smiling, having chemotherapy of along those ilks. And bit by bit, I watched this girl be destroyed and finally died. And of course, the parents were extremely upset, and the people outpoured their love and support and remembrance of this great girl who I never knew and will probably never know her family. And it really, really struck a chord in me because anyone who's had the good fortune of watching the brilliant documentary series by Ty Bollinger on the truth about cancer will now find it extremely difficult to argue, in spite of what we've been saying and trying to direct people for a very, very long time, will find it extremely difficult, I would argue impossible, to argue that chemotherapy is no therapy and it kills. And yet these wonderful people are once again starting to raise money to let's find the cure for cancer, and basically are still unaware that through ignorance, deliberately induced ignorance, they have actually almost certainly caused the demise of their loved daughter and never ever actually helped her. And I'm sure if they became aware of this, as many have, Ty Bollinger lost his father, I believe, they would become extremely angry and extremely upset. And I'm pretty damn sure that anyone trying to talk to these people now would be not well received. They would be shot down with the emotion, and I have no doubt, and I often bring Valerie Warwick in, who was the ex-oncology nurse for 18 years until she truly saw that she had wonderful people around her daughter, but nonetheless doing things that caused, I believe, her death. Now, this subject, losing patients, is, the point is this, this just one story, and according to David Noakes, 2 million people are killed a year just in cancer, just in the cancer industry, 2 million. I believe the number. This just one story will continue and perpetuate the lie, or perpetuate the lie, which is she died of cancer. And if you are watching this for the first time, and you haven't watched Ty Bollinger's series, I suggest you start there, particularly episode 1. It will leave you in no doubt that 98% of all people that receive chemo are dead within 5 years. And yet they will normally be labeled died of secondary cancers or this cancer. So the point of this, or the beginning of the point of this show, is several-fold. A, as soon as somebody passes, whether it be our patient or somebody else's, of course I don't even believe in patients, they're people. They're people, not patients, right? Patient is a legal term of a person, which Troy can talk about a little later on. But we're immediately unable to step in and say, I'm really sorry. I'm truly, truly sorry for your loss. But, and to stop this lie going around that is still fueled by many, many who have lost loved ones, dearly loved ones, that their loved one died of this or their loved one died of that. And the more you critically look at modern medicine, the more you will see that A, it is completely opposite to the natural laws of healing. They don't even take into consideration spirit or light or soul or what have you. It's completely alien to natural laws. And that if you hear me talk all the time about case histories to understand how someone got to a level of disease, but that continues through to death. And if they're suppressed and poisoned, it will ultimately lead to death. And we need to be having these conversations. And the reason we're not is because currently the system, particularly the legal system, we have some very good news coming up about how this is going to change, to truly support and empower real scientists, real doctors, real people with real intelligence and real integrity to bring much change, positive change to this planet, including in healthcare. But the legal system is set up not to protect the patient or the human being, but to protect modern medicine, modern pharmaceutical and alphabet agencies, and frankly, corporate interests. Now, when we also have a patient, human being that we take on that passes, and we do, the only thing we ever promise is we'll do everything we can to help you. That's all we can promise. The same thing occurs. We can't talk after their passing usually because there's family and there's all these things that are, it's just not right and proper. But again, it's important because the ones we haven't been able to help, which I must say is very few, and I need to define that. Some of them, we've extended their life and increased the quality of their life tremendously, before, and even then they've still passed, as well as people who have gone on to live a very long, healthy life. So it needs to be understood. But very often when someone enters into a natural protocol and still passes, the cynics, and there's plenty of them still there, will jump on it and say, well, you see, natural medicine is just quackery or variances of that. When again, we need to have this conversation that very often, and David Noakes is of GC Math, and Clive, I'm sure, will say, well, if you've had several rounds of chemo, it's almost impossible to turn someone around. So when people tend to come into a natural protocol, and that's assuming they're working with someone who really knows what they're doing, then very often they've come in last. We're still getting them last. And they'll usually come to you and say, well, we've tried everything else. And really what we're hearing is, well, we've poisoned ourselves to the extent we can't do any more, and we've gotten worse. Now help us. And I think that's quite a familiar scenario with people on this panel. So, I really want to hand it over to Troy so he can elucidate to those who aren't aware how the legal system has really prevented so many things, free energy, the whole lot from coming out. I know Troy said products prevented from being released because it's just not good business, but from the point of view of medicine and people, the advances that we should have had all these problems cured and a long time ago or massively improved. Why the legal system has prevented that, and the very good news of what's about to happen to enable and support the people who've truly put their own lives out there to help their fellow man. So Troy, I wonder if you'd be so kind.
Jeremy.
Yeah, as we all know, I think at the end of the day, what the real problem is with this world is the human tendency to hoard resources. We seem to have an innate ability to be very selfish. And when we look at commerce and trade and corporate enterprise, what we run into is a situation where somebody wants to invent the little widget, whatever that might be, and be the only person that gets to make it unless they have the power to give permission to others to do it. And that's the problem with copyrights, trademarks, and patents. So really, what happened a long time ago, let's take it back, let's say 150 years or better, we had a bunch of snake oil dealers, that were coming up with their little dandelion extract or their little cannabis extract, and they were going around and giving this stuff to people with the interest of healing and remedial products. And the so-called government, which by this time was really going more of a corporate enterprise kind of thing than actual true governance, was like, hey, this is an opportunity for us to dip into everyone who's trying to sell some kind of tincture. So let's set this thing called the medical industry up in a way that we can tap into the revenues, because it's all about revenues at the end of the day for these let's call them corporate vampires. So the corporations were like, okay, well, if we're going to get in trouble for selling our tincture, we need to form this legal fiction, and then we need to use whatever revenues we get to give incentives to these people who think that they run government corporations and get permission and exclusive right to be the only guy that gets to sell a dandelion tincture or a cannabis tincture or whatever type of tincture, and start the formation of monopolies. And the government, so-called government that is, has supported this to a T. So really, when we talk about medicine, you've always got folks who feel that they've been hurt in some way. Now, if somebody has cancer and I come along and I'm like, hey, did you know that you could use these various ways to treat your cancer? Let's say just frequency energy, right? Sound, let's say. The corporation over here that makes this drug for cancer treatment, and the company over here that makes this device for doing like photodynamic therapy, for example, you know, all these companies are vying for their place in this market and trying to use the legal system and the kickbacks that they give to these corporate agencies acting as government. They're working in collusion together to limit innovation through sequestration and those kinds of things. The other part of it is that you can have the best invention in the world, but if you are registered as a corporate entity, you are actually under the jurisdiction of the so-called government, which again is just other corporations that you have registered with. In other words, given your power to the king. That's what regis is in a registration. And now they can say, hey, great idea. Thanks for submitting your patent to the Library of Congress, Office of Trademarks, Patents, and Copyrights. However, since that information is now in our possession, we own it and we control it. And if we decide we don't want you to make this device after all, or this tincture or the whatever it is that now has a patent or a copyright or a trademark on it, they can say, no, you don't. And if you do, then we can hurt you now. Because we just told you you can't. You've authorized us through the registration of the patent to give us the authority over your product or your business. And that's how businesses can be intimidated by these so-called government agencies, right? They look at it like, oh, you filed your business so that you can be legit. Cool. That gives us power over you. We can tell you whether you can be in business tomorrow or not by shutting you down if we don't like what you do. You know, or giving you incentives if you're giving us enough of a kickback. So anyway, we've been looking at, me and many other developers out there have been hindered, as you all know, for decades in many cases, with what we'd like to bring to market that are truly effective, And we had to look at statutes and how they apply or not. And so I've been working with a very large group of attorneys, lawyers, judges, people that are really well versed in the Magna Carta and true law, natural law. That's really been my focus. I started studying law heavily, beginning with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I consider that the highest level of authority when you talk about a legal document. I consider that to be the highest level of authority that comes from men. Okay, because laws really don't come from men and women. They just don't. They are granted us by our Creator. They are rules that are beyond our control. I mean, I can't change Earth's rotational spin and the amount of gravity it has by manipulation. That's a Creator thing.
I wouldn't say that it's beyond you, Troy. I'm just saying, like.
In any event, that's not someplace I could be going. Okay, unless we can figure out and all agree that that might be a good thing. But in any event. So we started looking at this legal system and really what it is. And really what it is it's contracts. And so me as a business now, I used to have licensed businesses. I don't do that anymore. I am functioning as a sovereign charter. When somebody wants something that I have, I arrange a contract between me and that individual so that they have some kind of recourse if I harm them in some way. But I don't I don't have a government telling me what I can and can't do. I have not registered with anyone. My business is between me and my client. There is no potential for a third-party intervener unless a crime is in progress. Because the third-party intervener can't come to me and say, hey, look, you don't have a business license. I'm going to penalize you for that. It's like, well, show me the contract that gives you any authority to penalize me in any way, because I haven't signed any contract with you, right? So we've been working on this. So the good news is, very recently, in mid-July, the problem at the end of the day with the legal system, as you know, are statutes. And statutes only apply to an individual if there's a valid and verifiable contract. Well, if you don't have that, they can't touch you. So a lot of what's going on with the law and the courts is what's called assumption and presumption of jurisdiction. And the police don't have that any more than anybody else has, and until there's a contract that exists, right? Other than that, if you're talking to me, officer friendly, you better have a charge against me, okay, because you were eyewitness to a crime in progress that I was committing, injury to person or property, in other words. There's got to be a victim. Or you have to have a warrant issued by the court, okay? Or you have to have been dispatched by your office to respond to a call, okay? Those are the only three ways you get any information out of me, period. I don't have to talk to you. I'm not for hire. Thank you. So we filed a lien against the Bar Association, both the International Bar and the American Bar, as well as the U.S. Department of Justice. And what the result of that is that all of the wealth that the courts have been stealing through the judges, the lawyers, and the attorneys, using the law enforcement to manifest that for themselves, this wealth and control, their accounts receivable just became an accounts payable to the tune of $279 trillion that we're about ready to begin enforcement on. So what I mean to say here is that the legal system as we know it exists for those who are willing to honor an existing contract or engage into contract with other corporate entities. Okay, if those contracts don't exist, you're the god, you're the king, you're the queen, you know what I mean? As long as you're not out there doing harm, because once you do that, there's a charge against you, and now you're in that system. But the game of the courts causing injury of any form to natural living men and women for profit, that's all done. There is no more bar, just so you know. There's no more bar. So it boils down to contracts. So those of us who are trying to release sequestered technologies that have been just flat out denied because of our contracts with our governments, because we got a business license with them and they said no, and if we do it anyway, they're going to hurt us, and rightfully so. If we don't want that to happen to us, and we are engaged in a contract with like a doing business as licensed, whether we're not for profit or a for-profit agency, we can challenge the validity of that contract under the law. And to do that, we've got to have four things out of the way. This contract, whatever the contract that is, to have standing and jurisdiction, power of attorney, and all that in a court, has to have these four tenets met. That is full disclosure of the arrangement, the agreement, on both sides. Equal consideration, in other words, mutually beneficial. If it's not mutually beneficial, then that nullifies the contract. Also, the lawful terms and conditions of the arrangement have to be fully expressed. And then finally, the appropriate wet signatures. If you didn't sign it and the person that's filing a grievance against you didn't sign it and it's not witnessed, contract's null and void. Now you can get down to the business of the matter, which is really natural law, which has two tenets only. Do no harm and allow no harm to be done. So the whole justice system just went bye-bye when you talk about statutes. And there's over 66.5 million statutes under the Admiralty Maritime and UCC code system. Those don't even matter to you and me as men and women anymore unless we honor them, okay? But I would encourage anyone who's facing court in a situation where there is no victim, because a state can't be a victim, a county can't be a victim, a city of can't be a victim any more than a nation can be a victim. And most of these court cases that are going through the courts these days are the city of against Troy, the county of against Troy, the state of Oregon against Troy, the United States against Troy. These ideologies cannot be a victim, and we can no longer allow fictions to cause injury to matter of fact, and that has happened. I am happy.
And that's huge, Troy. I want to, because a lot of our viewers, we are forever saying, don't believe what we say, do your own research. I want to allow you just some space to discuss when people start trying to understand, comprehend is really the word, this system. And again, everything for me goes back to that the word magic, the spelling, because a lot of times people are using dictionaries for their etymologies when it's, you've got to get to the esoterics of these words, because that's how all of these statutes and these pretend laws and all of these are getting away with looking like truth, is because we accept them on face value, but we're not digging behind what is really being said to us. We in this conversation thus far, we've mentioned words like person, doctor, cure, the bench, which is another word for the bank, the judge, what's his real role, pharmacy. Talk to us about the importance of going back and doing some etymological research to understand these laws that are not going to be the first result you get when you start your Google searches to kind of comprehend this system of legal versus lawful that you're speaking of, Troy.
Well, I'm going to try and make it real short, but I'm going to start, though, with this by referring people to do their own research to two different things they want to look up. One is called SEC, which is the Security Exchange Commission number 2640220. Look that up. That is a powerful tool in We the People's toolbox to get past these impositions by policy enforcers, which is the origin of the word police, and with the courts themselves. We were talking earlier, Jeremy, was about patience. And most people really don't understand where the words that we use come from. But patient is someone under the care of a patron. Okay? Patron is acting as the father or the ultimate authority in a matter, and the patient takes that direction. Okay? The doctor is the manager of the dock. Okay? He is bringing a product on the land in a delivery, okay, through the hospitality of the doctor and the facilities that he needs to operate from, which is where the word hospital comes from, okay? And when you arrive as a product upon the land, the Roman Curia system, which is where all law pretty much in every country is founded in. That's the foundational premise, this ecclesiastical and canonical beliefs of the Roman Catholic Church. They've set the whole thing up as like a little pirate ship game, okay? So when you look at a courtroom, what you're talking about is a ship. That's why they talk about things like courtships and discuss things like partnerships and those kinds of things. And they put that into their jurisdiction by their ideology. And so one of the angles that we were taking, those of us that are working to pretty much turn that system around so that it can be virtuous and right and of integrity and honor, of clean hands, is we've been looking at these buildings called courthouses and realizing that when we talk about court, it's the defendant who's the court. Someone has accused somebody of something, and what they're doing is they're saying, hey, I got a grievance with you, so I'm going to court you so that I can get some kind of redress of grievance or path to restitution, right? So the court, when you end up in there, is really under the rule, just so you know, of the defendant. So if the defendant knows this, the first thing that the defendant should be doing when they get into the courtroom is turning the jurisdiction around right now, period. The court had the the administrators of the court have no authority at all, period. It doesn't matter what paperwork they can pull out of their butt. They have no authority until that authority is given through consent of the accused. Okay, so it's always important to challenge the jurisdiction of the court. So the best way to do that is to say, where's the victim? I have a right to unalienable right to face my accuser. Where's the victim? Oh, it's the state of Oregon. Oh, well, that ain't gonna work. Who's the person claiming I caused them injury? You know, if they can't produce that, the court has no status, standing, nor jurisdiction, and you can order and demand of the court that this issue be discharged from the record until a victim is produced. And so, pretty much what I'm trying to get here is we are now free, pretty much, if we can get there in our mind. We are pretty much free to explore now, as long as our intentions are pure and we're not out there to, you know, perpetrate injury to person or their property. And you're always going to have upset family members. You know, like if I'm trying to help little Susie, who's got cancer, and she dies anyway, the family's going to be bereaved, and they're going to be looking for something to take their mind off of it. And in every case, they're going to blame the doctor because it's the only thing they can point to now that they can't really do anything. You know, they're like, well, I can't blame God. I mean, you know, and I can't blame the devil. It's not like the, you know, it's not like that. They want to turn to something that they can wrap their mind around and make someone else responsible instead of writing it off to something like divine intervention. Something.
But let me just share with you, very seldom in the allopathic world do they blame that system. They accept it as part of, oh, they've done all they could. You've filled with IVs of things, and you've got tablets you've swallowed all day long, and you're drinking this, and you're in the no sun. I mean, but when they pass, it's just, oh, it was just so beautiful how they've, you know, the air condition was set nice. You know what I mean? But they never stop and think, did this protocol have anything to do with it? But when there's a natural healthcare practitioner that's involved, the first thing that comes out is, I told you this would never work. You know, we were right. And we just need to kind of massage people into, let's look a little bit deeper. Clive, you've got a really brilliant example of what we've been talking about, this legal, lawful word spelling and the trickery of this system. Talk to our viewers, Clive, about the way that words were playing in the Cancer Act and the implications of that, if you would.
You caught me on the hop there. I was so into what Troy was saying that honestly, can I pass on this one? Let Troy carry on. I was, you know.
Absolutely. Well, we can let Jeremy take this question. Jeremy, again, we're talking about the word magic that's used to kind of cloak the truths. We have to be very careful in these shows, as we've experienced. You know, even Clive has been asked, "Oh, sorry, we can't air your material, getting a little too close to home." That, to me, is a signal we're on the right course here. But Jeremy, talk to me about the implications of the Cancer Act and what was left for humanity to deal with once that puppy got passed.
Well, I want to thank Troy first of all for doing, you know, an excellent job there. For anyone who's listening that already is aware, they will know exactly what Troy is saying. So if you don't mind, I would like to go down another level for those who don't know even the basics. Particularly when you say it's contract, which for still a lot of people it's not. They would say, well, no, it's the law. No, it's not. It's legislation. And they'll say, yes, but that is the law. And the fact is that just shows their ignorance. And I don't mean that harshly, because we've all come out of ignorance who've learned this, where we believed it was the law. But you can take any statute you like, and I'm pretty certain, and I haven't read the 66.5 million of them, and I'm pretty damn sure it will start along the lines of every person, something like that. It will use the word person. Well, the greatest thing that human beings need to wake up to, and really quick now, because things are really going to change for the positive. They are changing for the positive, even if you're not aware of it, is that you are not a person. It's as simple as that. And when you start to look into the origins of language, you'll see that the person is a persona. It is a mask that they have laid on you. And in actual fact, they've made you slaves and they've made you ships. You'll see that your name is always in all capital letters. The only other place that you'll find your name always in capital letters is on a grave tombstone. And it means you're dead. And these persons that you've been educated from almost out of the womb, you hear the word person all the time. Every sign is no persons allowed, or every person must. And as I've said, the greatest mind control red flag for mass mind control is repetition. And if you repeat this, which it has, over and over again, on the television, on the radio, everywhere, normal conversation is, he's a good person, she's a nice person. No, they're not. I say it all the time. And immediately you get this look. She is. No, she's not. She may be a lovely woman, but she is not a lovely person. And this trickery, and it is magic, has been the single greatest weapon, which is why the pen is mightier than the sword, used against humanity. Because then you're sent to their indoctrination camps, which is school, and you are educated stupid. And I know this still upsets people, but it's true. Once you see the facts of the matter, you are not taught to read and write, quite the opposite. So when you have these cases, for example, and I forget the name, but it was quite prominent recently, of a young girl who was dragged from her home and forcibly made to have chemotherapy. And everyone is up in arms of how you can do that. It's simple. She is ignorant, as were her family, of the knowledge that she is not a person. And when they would have first arrived there, they would have said, "Are you la 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 la?" And that sounds like your name, whereas grammatically the correct way is, "Are you the human being commonly known as India Murkison?" Not, "Are you India Murkison?" And you should always see their paperwork, because it will be in all capital letters, or Miss or Mrs. All these are titles within an admiralty system, by the way. The moment you go, yes, you've contracted. So this is what Troy's talking about, contract. And you have no idea you've contracted. So then they take you off to their courts, and Troy correctly said they're ships. Well, people go, no, they're not ships. Yes, they are. They're ships in dry dock. They may not look like a ship, other than they all have a flag. Now, you've all been educated stupid, so you don't really know what flags mean. I mean, I mean this kindly. I don't want to upset people, but I do want to ruffle you up to go see if we're talking madness. But the flag which you walk past is declaring, and they know what it means, exactly what you're about to walk into. And then, there's always that little fence in a court. Now, do you really think that's for security? Do you really think that that's to stop you, the public? No, it is to signify you've left the land and entered into dry dock on a ship, where you stand in the dock, right? And then there's a whole other amount of foolishness, boxes, and so on and so forth, that most people don't understand why everyone's in boxes, why the judge is higher. He's on a different plane. All this thing, when you start looking into it, will show you it's all theatre. But it's very important theatre, because they will call your name, which you'll answer to, and then they will normally say, "Do you understand?" Usually the word understand comes in pretty early on in the game. Now, you've been educated, as I was, to say yes. But it's completely wrong, because understand means, do you stand under me? And if you say yes, tough. You've proven you're stupid, and they know it, and now they've got you by the proverbial balls. So, when Troy talks about it, we have to have a fundamental, and it's not difficult, I encourage you, it's not difficult. A fundamental understanding, comprehension, there you go, I'm using the wrong word straight away. Comprehension of the language and documents being used against you. And if you want to go further into this and start studying quantum language, such as David Wynne Miller and all of, it's very, very, very easy to very quickly show you that every statute ever written is nonsensical. It is all working on complete presumption that when you read it, I mean, we often do this verbally, not written. When you say, what does 4 plus 4 equal 8? And most people go, yes, and then you spell it out and you spell 4, F-O-W, you know, and then the next 4, F-O-W, F-O-R-E, sorry. And then 8 is A-T-E, and it makes no sense. And it's clear to the average human being that makes no sense. 4 plus 4 equals 8. That's nonsensical. Well, when you understand language, every statute written makes no sense. And a judge knows that. And he's testing you to see if you know it. And so not only jurisdiction, but it is complete presumption that this statute actually says anything. But they've used this, and they've used this. Let's not fluff around here. They've used this to cause immense harm, and it's all about money, which is why you're charged. Now, when Troy says we, and he's talking about some amazing people, have filed a lien against the international bars and the American bar and so forth, which basically operate this scam, what it means is they've effectively shut it down. And the sooner we get to understand that, and it means now we can start to bring back in natural law. Natural law, even if you can't read and write, is simply do no harm. And if there's no victim, and you have the right to choose how you want to live and how you want to be helped and how you want to whatever, as long as you do no harm. How simple and beautiful is that?
Simplicity sings to me, and I know, like I said, this thirsty American public that I personally can, I experience is ready for this. I mean, really, because people are waking up. It's like a wave in a stadium. Before it was kind of like drops in the pond, but now there's a ripple that is swelling into a wave. And as I said, it's really humbling to see, because for so long it's like, am I the only one who thinks something's weird here? Or, but on the back of what's been shared thus far, I want to bring this conversation over to you, Darko, because this word magic and these titles, you found them so just alarming and disturbing that you, who were trained and went into debt and all of that kind of stuff to go to school to become a doctor, refuses to use that title now. Talk to us about the impact of that word in your life and why it was important for you to make a statement that bold.
Well, when I became aware of what titles mean, I started to understand actually the whole medical system. We have to know that all our licenses are based on one document, and this document is birth certificate. Now, birth certificate, our name is in capital letters, which means we are deceased and we became persons. And this is false. And since every license is issued on date of this license, it means that it is a joke, it is invalid. So doctor's license is basically invalid. But what the license means, it means that you are licensed by the government that you can do this job the way it is designed, and you are being protected by the government. So, which means that if you are a doctor and you are poisoning your patients and they die, well, you are being protected and exempt. It's not your fault because you were doing everything according to the law of the industry and according to the license that was issued to you. And this is why doctors are not being prosecuted even though they are killing people. Now, why do I say killing people? Because they use drugs. Now, everybody knows that if you are healthy, you should not be taking any drug because it will harm you, because they are all toxic. So how the heck do you think that when your body is really in bad shape and basically fighting for survival, if you put the poisons that will normally harm you when you are healthy, how do you think they are going to all of a sudden miraculously help you? This absolutely makes no sense, but nobody thinks about it because we are brought in a system that actually rewards those who don't think. All you have to do is memorize and spit on demand, and you are excellent student, and you are high ranking, and you can go to medical schools or any high professions, and you will be well taken care of because you obey like a sheep. As soon as you question, you are not a good material because you cannot be manipulated so easily, and you can never really achieve recognition in the system because, again, you are questioning, this teaching starts already from when you are born. When you go to church first time as a child, as soon as you see that something doesn't comply and you say, well, Adam and Eve, and they had two sons and they fight and they split and they found themselves white where? You don't believe in God? Okay, you question, you don't believe in God, you are done, you are over. I mean, this is just one simple example of these things. We are living in completely awkward, crooked world, and nobody has even tries to figure things out. We just take it as it is, don't question, because this is how we are being raised, brainwashed through our lives since the time we are born. Individuality is not allowed. We all have to be stamped with the same stamp and processed to the same line, and no buts and ifs. And hopefully this is now falling apart, and I know at least on this panel, every one of us is aware of what is going on, and we are trying our best to wake up people so they see this. It is very difficult because, as Jeremy mentioned, patients that come to us are the ones who are on their last leg. And then they expect miracle because they heard so-and-so got cured and he was in such a bad shape and whatever. Well, yes, it very often works, but sometimes it doesn't, because we don't, again, take the whole picture together. There is a karma, there is a karmic law. There are things that have to happen no matter what you do, and they are happening that way for experience, and we all have to go through our experiences. So, there is always one part that can, that we have to address and we have to recognize. And there is no such a thing that everybody can be saved. But in majority cases, definitely, I have many examples that I can say, but I am not even pushing them out because people just have mind that is pre-programmed, that it is set, and no matter what you say, they are just not going to believe it. And, for example, on my blog, I showed a picture of one gentleman who came. He was released after 3 months in hospital. He was released with recommendation to fly. I'm now in Tarapoto, Peru, to fly from Tarapoto to Lima to have his leg amputated because of circulatory problem caused by diabetes. Well, the foot started with gangrene, had a gangrene spots on it. I immediately started with the cleansing process and healing. I mean, I did nothing. I just educated him and he did the job. And after 2 weeks, actually it was 3 weeks, when I took another picture and posted completely different leg. Okay, it basically started healing. The necrotic spots were over. Still a little bit, you can see where they were, but the leg was healing. Now, another 2 weeks later, all of a sudden, he stopped coming in and stopped responding to telephone. So finally, after a month or more, we managed to get in touch with him. Well, he went to annual checkup that was recommended to him, and doctor told him that he was lacking a little bit of hemoglobin and that he needs to eat cooked vegetables. And I forbid him cooked vegetables because he was diabetic. So he did not use any insulin for 4 or 3 months when he was, not even 2 months he was with me. Didn't use any insulin. He was recovering. He was feeling great. And now he goes back to trust the same industry that almost cut his leg off. This is mind of the humans when they are programmed. And it is so damn hard to get off of this program because this is the repetition of everything you see. Radio, television, newspapers, movies, through all these media, you are being constantly programmed. And it is very, very hard to skip this program and to become conscious.
Spot on there. It really is. Troy, please.
I just wanted to make one more point on the idea of licenses and licensing. You know, that we really need to think about that word for a second. When we look at license, we're talking about to lie, in a sense. It is permission to be licentious, okay? So people over here who are capitalizing because they're acting like mafiosos. You know, you could go ahead and do business, but you're gonna need some protection. So you gotta give us money so we can protect your ass, okay?
You do that so well.
That's what's going on here, right?
And it's like they steal your rights and then sell them back to you or something. It's that maybe even you said that the other day, but it's ringing in my head as you speak. It's true.
So they're like, if you give us money, we'll let you be licentious. We will issue you a license so that you can lie in a sense and hide behind this fictitious ideology. And at which point we've decided you've been just a little bit too licentious. We're going to pull your license and keep you from doing anything until you give us more money. I mean, that's really what's going on here with licensing. And I just wanted to make that point because we were talking about that.
It's comical once you kind of understand it, you know. Once you see it, when I say it, I mean, again, this veil of word magic that cloaks our vision, literally. I mean, just keep your head down, stick to the script, just keep texting, keep playing your video games, you know, and, you know, don't look up and don't ask questions like Darko said. Now, Troy, we're talking about these alternatives and things that are going to be available to humanity, these innovations and such. And, you know, we talk about energy medicine here a lot. We've had a lot of the masters on discussing that. Many of the practitioners here are well into the rife technology, the spooky 2, and these kinds of things. Clive and his something reading machine, they could never finish it. They're always on the cutting edge. Now, you were talking to me this morning about something called the YP333, which I love your numerology system, and the MK111. Talk to us about some of these things that we can look forward to, especially from the Global Sovereign Alliance, on that front of health and things that are not going to be suppressed anymore.
Okay, well, you know, using sound as a therapy or a reparative or rejuvenative system is impossible to trademark, patent, and copyright. I mean, they just occur in nature. We've got sound everywhere we look. It's all about frequencies, right, at the end of the day. Those are impossible for anybody to say, hey, I'm claiming ownership of the 111 cycles. You can't do that, right? So the medical industry has set everything up in a very trademark, patent, copyright-oriented thing. That's why they shut down holistic systems, especially when you're talking about sound systems. There's not one sound therapy endorsed by the AMA in existence, period. They don't want that. There's no way for them to generate revenues every 7 years by adding a new little ingredient to something that they've been getting paid for 7 years, and making that so that it's easily accessible as long as you're paying for it. And then coming after people who make things that don't cost anything, like, for example, with the MK111, which is a pain relief system I developed about 5 years ago. I had a toothache, no money, no medical coverage, nothing. And started looking into sound. I was like, I've got a really lengthy background in sound engineering, sound design, and production and recording and whatnot. And so I was like, yeah, there's got to be a way to find some kind of frequencies that would work for that. So I got online and pulled up some what are called binaural beats, like 432 I'd heard is really great, for love frequency, and 528 is used for working with DNA reparation, rejuvenation anyway. And so I started listening to some of these things and nothing was working. So I got real scientific about it and created these systems called kinesonics, and they're actually triaural systems, or I'm using 3 tones. These tones are equilaterally balanced, of equal amplitude, and very specifically chosen to do very specific jobs. So in the case of the MK111 for pain relief, I used 111 cycles in the dead center stereo field, right? And that's an audible tone that we can hear. It's within the audio range, or audible range. And I used 111 cycles because it has been known to produce endorphins. It kicks the central nervous system and the pituitary gland into producing energetically produced opiates. In one channel, I used a subsonic frequency, which is 4 cycles, 4.0. And that's known to stimulate the brain into producing enkephalin, which promotes a process called nociception. So it's kind of activating what are called nociceptors, which are pain receiver cells. And then in the opposite channel over here, I used another subsonic tone, and that was 2.5 cycles per second. And that tone is known to stimulate pain cells, make them blossom like a little flower. So as these endogenically produced opiates wash through the system, they glom onto those optimized pain cell receptors, and actually works very effectively just using those 3 different tones in this system. Interesting thing about it is anytime you've got 3 points in geometry, a 4th point manifests through the pyramid effect. That's why they call it fire in the middle, is what pyramid means. That 4th point that manifests is the difference between the 2 subsonic tones, which happens to be 1.5 cycles per second, which happens to be known as Abramson's universal healing frequency. So when you listen to this triaural set of equilaterally balanced sine waves, in the case of the MK111, it kicks your body into doing the same thing that it does when it goes into shock. Like if you cut your finger really bad, it hurts for a second, and then it don't hurt for a while, and you're like, I haven't even taken anything for pain yet. And then eventually the pain comes back. Well, the MK111 does the same thing to the human physiology. In the case of this other system, the YP333 that you'd mentioned, that's a different type of system. So I'm using 1 sine wave, which is, and all 3 of the tones are audible in this case. But the one in the dead center is a sine wave, and it's used for plasma conditioning, really, to optimize blood plasma. And then the other 2 tones are square waves. And they're very carefully selected to create basically like a chainsaw effect on the exoskeletal structure of the what's the word? Bacillococcus, is that right? Of a virus. You've got the stem and you got the little bulb on the end. I think it's the bacillococcus is the right word for that structure. Anyway, the Yersinia pestis virus, I looked up some frequencies on that. Some of the research that was done through the Consolidated Annotated Frequency List that was created, put together years ago by a gentleman named Brian McInturf. He took a whole bunch of frequencies. A lot of them were the Rife frequencies. Some of them were Garvey sets. And some of them were the work that Barr did along with Rife. And he took all of these frequencies and put them together. And there's like over 2,200 melodies that they mapped frequencies for. So I look in the kinesonic design, I look at ancient sacred geometry using a pseudoscience called the extended solfege frequencies. They're based around a base 9 system. I compare those against some of these other frequencies in the Consolidated Annotated Frequency List, and then I apply my own math to it. I work in base 9 only. I left the decimal system behind.
Let me remind you, if you want to use any visual aids, you can share your screen if you're comfortable doing that.
Okay.
Little green button in the bottom if you'd like. That's up to you.
Sure, that's a good idea. Let me grab it and turn on a screen share real quick.
Absolutely.
That might make it easier to visualize what we're talking about here. Let's see here. Images. Get that one going there. And
Jeremy, did you want to comment while he's digging up the file so that we can continue to wow the viewers as well as myself?
Well, only I mean, Troy's done a great job, but I want him to keep it foundational because we need to do a whole show on his work, which is what leading up to, because it's absolutely genius. I can't wait to be working with Troy. We've discussed it when the new plasma attachment comes out for the Spooky 2 and start playing around with these frequencies through that. It's going to get very interesting.
Absolutely. Can't wait.
Share the screen now.
Okay.
This is the think space behind the MK111 here. Okay. We've got a stereo field left, center, and right. I've got 111 cycles in the stereo field, dead center. 4.0 in the left channel, 2.5 in the right. The manifestation is the 1.5. And really the interesting thing about this system is once that I tried it for my own toothache, and it worked great. I was just like, whoa, this is awesome. The next time I tried it was for migraine. And I don't get migraines very often at all, but when I get them, they're doozies. And I tried it for that, and it worked great again. And I ended up trying it a third time a couple of months later, and it worked great. And after that, I realized that you don't even need to use these things any more than maybe half a dozen times because it works sound. It works kind of like a song. You can hear a song just once in your life, and it's like, oh, that's a great song, and I can't wait to hear it again. And 6 months or a year can go by before it comes back on again, but it's just as fresh in your mind hearing it the second time as it was the first time. The kinesonics kind of work the same way. Sonic imprinting, let's call it. And so I used the thing about 3 times in my life, and now when I get a toothache, I just imagine that tone. And even if the tone is a couple of cycles above or below what I'm imagining, my physiology starts kicking into that process. In any event, the cool thing about the system is that it can, I believe, be used in mass triage scenarios where you've got, let's say, a whole bunch of people coming into an emergency room. Let's say there was some kind of disaster and a lot of people got hurt. It takes time for a certified professional to do the triage and determine who's going to react to what, because we want to give everybody pain relief now, but it could be half an hour before we get to you because we've got too many patients in the room and we're having to do all of these individual assessments through our triage process. So with this system, and it hasn't been tested in a mass triage environment yet, I can't wait to try it, but in theory you could put some speakers in the room and pump this tone in the room, and everyone would be getting temporary pain relief until they could actually get some kind of medicinal administration applied.
Wow. 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 That's all I can say. Just wow. And a couple more wows.
There you go. So there's a graphic. I'd like to come back to talking about the YP33, 333 per second.
Okay, go ahead and do that real quick.
I am still sharing the screens here. The YP333 is also trilaterally balanced. It's a combination of 3 waveforms, which is 432, 333, and 216. The reason I chose 432 was basically to optimize plasma. The second tone, 333, is used as a square wave. It's placed to one side of the stereo field and is intended to disrupt the integrity of the Coccobacillus structure of the Yersinia pestis bacterium, which is basically known also as the bubonic plague, Black Death. That's the cause. This particular bacterium, the Yersinia pestis, is the root of that problem. The third tone used is 216 cycles, which has also been matched against the consolidated annotated frequencies list and shown to have an effect on this particular bacterium. So I put that in the opposite channel. This creates an offset between 333 and 216 that functions pretty much kind of like a chainsaw. The idea is to shatter the exoskeletal structure of that virus. So this needs to be tested in a lab. This is the YP333 has not been tested yet. Well, I shouldn't say that. It was tested. I'm going to quit sharing my screen here for a second. It was tested at a lab in Atlanta, Georgia. I won't mention the doctor's name, Okay, but that's basically where the Centers for Disease Control is, and most of the research done on viruses, bacterium, and parasites comes out of there. So I sent this YP333 system to the doctor there for him to do some evaluation on it. Well, he took the idea of the how to use the MK111, which is through headphones, right? Because you're stimulating the brain and doing the capillin and the endorphin production, right? And tried to apply it directly to a patient that way, a patient that had Ebola, because the structures of the Ebola virus and the Yersinia pestis are very similar as far as anatomically speaking and structurally speaking. So since Ebola is a man-made patented thing, it was kind of hard to really create a system using any prior references, whereas with the bubonic plague, that was much easier. So anyway, he had this patient. I mean, he went right to the patient to try the testing on this. This is not how you do this stuff. The guy should have called me and said, hey, Troy, how do I apply this particular system? I know that the MK111 you use through headphones, but how do I test this in a lab? I never got that call. The next call I did get was through somebody else who I forwarded that system to, and then he forwarded on to the doctor or the lab scientist. Anyway, I get word back from not the doctor directly, but the other guy. He says, yeah, man, the system don't work, man. We put the guy on headphones, pumped that sound through the thing, and it just had no effect on his Ebola at all. And I was just like, oh, God, this person's a doctor. The trick with this YP333 system that really needs to be done, and I just don't have lab access, is that we need to take a culture of the Yersinia pestis virus and put it in a petri dish. And we need to have that petri dish on like a somatics table, so we can pump that energy and see how it affects the virus. If that works, the proper way to apply that particular kinesonic system would be on a vibration table, because you can't stimulate a local area when you're talking about viral infections or bacterial infections, or even parasitic infections for that matter, because they're going to go as far as they can away from the source of the energy, right? And you don't want like things moving from your thigh over into your opposite buttock, because it's not liking the treatment it's getting at the thigh level. So really with the YP333, as far as the treatment for bubonic plague, that would take stimulation of the entire body at once to break down those exoskeletal structures of that bacterium. So anyway, enough of that.
Yeah. All in due time. I'm telling you, like, all these things are just soon to be funded however kind of way. I don't know the way. We're open to however that manifests, but I can't wait till like this world is just flush with this kind of stuff, because it's well past time. Before we come to the end of the show, Clive is back, and the kitten has given him permission to speak at this time. So while we have him, before the cat gets mad, Clive, weigh in on the conversation we've been having about legal and lawful and this word spelling and all of this kerfuffle with this magic that we have been missing all of this time.
Well, with the Hippocratic Oath, as I think we all know, it says first do no harm. But, okay, so they do no harm first, but then what do they do afterwards? Well, quite a lot of harm, it seems. You know, I wonder at what point doctors and lawyers wake up to the fact that it's not what they thought. Because clearly at some point, doctors realize that the drugs aren't working like they were told. And at some point, the lawyers must wake up and work out that they're actually part of a criminal mafia. I was interested to ask Troy, actually, at what stage he feels that lawyers wake up to what they're really doing.
Well, I would have to say that is happening already. I did mention the SEC case number 2640220, but another case has come down the line since then, about 2 weeks ago, and that is called the Lufkin case. And that case number is 9:14-CV, as in Chris Victor, -138. I encourage people to look up both the SEC 2640220 number and the 9:14-CV-138 number. Those two things are super powerful for getting out of any mess when you're being approached by policy enforcers and or court administrators who are trying to drag you into the system so they can assign themselves as beneficiaries of the trust account that was created in your name through the issuance of the bond against you, through the birth certificate that was created once the state sent that certificate of live birth to Washington, to the federal government. So the number I just mentioned, the 9:14-CV-138 number, has to do with federal jurisdiction, which was challenged. So the federal government, it's only applicable if you consent. Other than that, you can basically be nice and tell them the FOAD, basically. Sorry.
And this is true not just in the United Interstate America, correct?
That is correct. It applies to any court that is under UCC and or Admiralty Maritime law. And most of them. Yep, and most of the courts,
all of them.
Yeah, most of the courts these days are actually automatically in the Admiralty Maritime jurisdiction, even though that's only supposed to relate to intracontinental trade or trade done on water. So what we're doing is we're considering all of these courts as ships that are stuck on land. So now we can file salvage liens against every court and say, you just lost your ship, bro. It's on land, man. It's no longer under Admiralty Maritime law. And oh, by the way, all of you guys that were on that ship, that worked for that ship, that were swabbies and first mates and whatever you were, you're actually stuck on land now. Now you're in the people's jurisdiction. You can't operate under Admiralty Maritime law anymore. So we can file a commercial lien against you because that, there's a funny word. It kind of comes from pirate speak, and I'm just making this up, okay? But it's really applicable. The word liberty, right? Liberty. Imagine it spoken like a pirate. Lie be our tie. Okay, it's all about the fiction, right? And so the captain of the ship, which is the adjudicator, is really what he is, but he calls himself a judge, right? And he sits on high with his black dress and this wonderful wig in many cases. They just don't have the authority of the captain of the ship when the ship is stuck on land and all of the employees are on shore leave. So we're filing commercial liens against these corporate pirates, and we are confiscating their ship because it's stuck on land. And that's what the importance of those two instruments are, the SEC 2640220 number and the 9:14-CV-138 number are. That's all part of those. Those two things are super, super powerful. It can shut down any law enforcer if you know how to use it. Shut down any court administrator. Shut them down.
And the people get the booty.
Troy, just we come to close because I knew this could be a two-parter and then we'll have to do a second part. But can you, there's many that will never do any of this because they're still too frightened, but could you give your honest opinion of what the near future will bring from these liens that are being filed and all the other things, of how you believe things are going to change for the benefit of those who will really never stand up because they just won't?
Sure. The next step is to get control of the banking system, and that is in process. That lien should cure very soon. It's a lien against one trust corporation that controls all of the 5 major banks in the nation, and those 5 banks control all the other banks in at least America. But these are worldwide banks we're talking about, these 5. And so that lien will cure very soon here. When that happens, we can take the lien that was filed against the International Bar, the American Bar, and the DOJ, which is that $279 trillion I mentioned, and we can deposit that into public trust banks. And the people that are administrators of those trust banks will be duty-bound by a new oath, which functions as not only a new oath of office, but a waiver of any and all prior oaths in their career. Then they'll be entrusted to responsibly redistribute the wealth through virtuous business plan proposals, basically. And so people who have an idea that benefits the community, creates jobs, they can go to the nearest bank, they can submit their business plan, and the people who review those business plans, as long as it's a plan of honor and integrity, the resources will be forwarded. Now, it's important to note that money is going to disappear over this next let's call it generation, this next 20, 30 years, right? We've got to have a bridging technology between the old world money system that everybody's been brainwashed into thinking we have to have. There is no value in anything unless it's a dollar, for heaven's sakes, right? That's going bye-bye. But it's going to take some, couple decades to get past that. But in the meantime, the future is so bright, I'm just telling you, that we're going to need to wear welding blast shields to protect our eyesight, okay? It's just that bright. 2016 is going to be a very good year. 2017 will be better. And it's going to take the next 3, 4, 5 years for people to really get it. But by 2020, we will be looking so good. We won't even believe, looking back 5 years prior, just how bad things really got and how that could have even happened, And we're on our way. We are well on our way. This next year is going to be all about the people, and it's going to pretty much involve the demonization, condemnation, and literally decimation of 3 ghosts that haunt all of us: the body politic, the body corporate, and the body religious order. These people are going to lose power. The power is now in the people, and we just have to learn that. So that's what we do here. We're putting all this information out there as quick as we can and getting people used to it. And thank you all so much.
Cheers to that, my friend. And on that note, you guys, any closing remarks before we call this a show? Because, we could go on for weeks. And, we know how this goes. Jeremy, anything you want to say before we say goodbye to our guests and our viewers?
Well, apart from a heartfelt thank you once again to our good friend Troy and GSA Global Sovereign Alliance, who are all on Naturally Better TV. But for all of you, those of you who are listening and follow us, and those who are new to this, the future, we've seen the future really is bright. The truth and honor have returned to this world. And get your sunglasses out, because it's going to get sunny.
Yeah, baby. Darko, closing remarks, my darling.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Troy, thank you very much. And I'm expecting to get some of those recordings for these sounds so I can experience them for myself and share with some of the sick people here in Peru. And the future, I know it's getting better, because I noticed that people all of a sudden stop to follow the traditional allopathic medicine, and they are experiencing and being aware that pills are not helping them. They are actually making them sicker. So I'm sure that, and I see the change already, and once when it starts, it is going to be an avalanche. It's going to be just like a flipping of the earth on its axis.
Yeah. Clive, closing remarks.
Well, I'd like to say that Troy mentioned migraines earlier, and the first thing I would say to anybody who's having migraines is, are they dehydrated, and are they in need of supplementation with magnesium? Because very often those 2 things are part of the cause.
Absolutely. And I will vouch personally for the Kenasonics. They work. I hardly ever have migraines. I did once, and Jeremy's trying to give me all these things that required me to move to sort my headache. I could not move. I put my headphones in, and 10 minutes later, then I was fine. I did get up then and supplement with magnesium, just so that the underlying cause of the problem would be sorted out. But I'm just here to say, 2 hands up for Mathisen Kenasonics. So follow GSA-TV here on NBTV, and continue to join us for the Owner's Manual of the Human Body. Every Saturday, we will record a new show and put it out for you. It will be available every Sunday on naturallybetter.tv. We thank you for your time, your patience, and your interest. Continue awakening. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.